Well, good evening. Welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio. We've have Kirk here. We may get JB a little later on.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, JB.
Hey, JB.
I had the opportunity, based on a friend's recommendation, to listen to the first hour or so of what is 6 hours of audio. It's an audiobook read, I think, by the author himself. The fellow's name is Edwin Black. His book is called IBM and the Holocaust. I tell you what, it's numbing. I would strongly encourage everyone to listen to Edwin Black's book called IBM and the Holocaust. Edwin Black, both of his parents were victims of the Nazi regime and were in Nazi concentration camps. And Edwin Black, when he was a young man, went to one of the Holocaust museums, and there was a display in the Holocaust Museum of a card sorting machine, card reading machine. And as soon as I heard this, first time I was told, listen, there is a very significant connection, an overwhelming connection between IBM and the Holocaust. In fact, you could possibly say, and probably should say, that without IBM, the scope of the Holocaust would have been, I don't know what the right word is. It's not substantially less. It's monumentally less. Without the Holocaust, the Germans, when they went into each new town and they rounded up Jews, no one ever bothered to ask, how do they know who was the Jews? Where did they come up with a list of who was a Jew and who was not? How did they organize all of those Jews once they rounded them up? How did they keep track of them and get them to the appropriate concentration camp just in time to either work them to death because they had room for others that had died, or to cremate them, incinerate them? Maybe the scope,
very logistical.
The scope of transporting what really was 12 million people, because there were 6 million Romana gypsies, which, by the way, are also Jews. It's not a well-known fact, but based on their DNA, the gypsies, the Romana, are also Jews. It's really 12 million Jews that were killed during the Holocaust, not 6. To keep track of and to move into these death camps, 6 million people is an astonishing program. How did they figure out who they were, and how do they keep track of them? How do we know any of this? Come to find out, IBM started in business as a company producing census records. They came up with the idea that you could punch holes in cards in various columns, and each column could represent things like the ethnicity of the person, their skill set, physical attributes, where they lived, their age, this sort of thing. And the Nazis took it further, so they had categories for where they were picked up, what monies were taken from them, how they met their doom, whether they were incinerated or whether they died of natural causes, worked to death, escaped. But that IBM, knowingly and willingly, deliberately, not only sold billions of these punch cards to the Nazi regime and sold them the machines, they managed the machines and kept duplicate records.
God.
You just, when I heard this, my first reaction is, oh, come on, that's an exaggeration. There is no way that listen, I understand that Watson was German and that Watson, the founder of IBM, like Henry Ford, was an anti-Semite, and that both of them supported the Nazi regime. I understand that history. But you can't make the claim that without IBM, the Holocaust is a tiny fraction of what it otherwise would have been. But I was wrong. Edwin Black makes a irrefutable case. He is stunningly effective in his research and his rationale. And I would just encourage everyone to listen to Edwin Black, IBM and the Holocaust, to think of how this prestigious American company was complicit in the rounding up, the categorizing the ethnicity, and robbing Jews of their dignity, their freedom, and in many cases, 12 million cases, their lives, is a story that ought to be known, and there ought to be accountability. There is a 75th anniversary of the opening of Auschwitz is being observed in Israel, and there's world leaders in Israel there. One of them is not the top government official of Germany, but the president of Germany is there. And he just flat out owned it. He said, you know, it was my people that did it. It's the single worst crime that's ever been perpetrated on humanity. We are exceedingly saddened that it happened and that we were the reason for it. And while that's all true, well, the leaders of France and the Ukraine were there. Poland, I think missed because they're having a squabble with Russia. And the squabble with Russia is over this very issue. What also needed to be said is, but we did not act alone. Yes, we were the lead perpetrator. But without the complicity of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, this never would have happened. Without the complicity of the French and the Ukrainians and the Poles and the Dutch and so many others, this would never have happened. And it's with the Greeks as well. And if we don't take ownership collectively of this and how the entire continent was responsible for this and acknowledge the fact that anti-Semitism is as bad now as it was before this all occurred. And it only occurred because the vast majority of people in Europe, Christians, despised Jews. Why? Because Paul was anti-Jewish, and the Christian religion is based upon anti-Semitism. And yet he didn't hold any of those people accountable, and none of them wanted to point the finger at themselves. But it's beyond that. Ford Motor Company ought to have been held accountable as complicit because they were. Union Bank, George Herbert Walker, Prescott Bush, and of course IBM. And if the world thinks that it's only those Nazis that are going to be held accountable for what they did, I'm telling you they're wrong. And fortunately, the German president didn't say, you know, we had a madman and, you know, we all just followed the madman. There was really nothing we could do. He took ownership of it. Mm-hmm. And there is no way that anybody else can deflect it to another individual. The climate was right, and Hitler rose to power and collectively was able to pull off the Holocaust and kill, whether it's 6 or 12 million Jews, depending on how you view the Romana DNA, the Gypsy DNA. It only happened because the majority of people, and particularly the Roman Catholic Church and companies like IBM, wanted it to happen.
How do you want it to happen? I mean, God damn.
They wanted it to happen in Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler rose to power because the German people wanted it to happen. They wanted to blame Jews for all of their grievances, even though Jews had nothing to do with any of their grievances. a lot of that falls right to the disgusting feet of Shaul, Paul. I want to begin way before we finished yesterday. Kirk, we talked before the program, and I'm delighted that you're here with us. I understand that Terry has taken 2 turns for the worse in the last week, that there was hope at this time last week. There's still hope again, but she has really been battling infection from the surgeries that she's had, and now going on 3 months, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's been a long haul. She's been really an amazing fighter through this haul.
Yeah, absolutely.
Malignancy is a terrible thing as to what it does to the body, and while that malignancy is hard on the body, the malignancy of Christianity and Islam is far more ruthless on one's soul.
Agreed.
This says, Acts 13:34. God, I read this 5 minutes ago before the show began, and it's hard for me to read it. This is hard for me to say because it says that the inspiration for half the Christian New Testament. Paul authored, 14 books, including Hebrews. And he is the sole impetus behind the book that bears Luke's name, because Luke was his co-worker. And he is the subject of Acts. And as we have determined, he was the inspiration behind whoever the fraud was that wrote the book attributed to Matthew. He's the inspiration for half the Christian New Testament. He is the father of the religion. According to God, he is the father of lies, the son of evil, and he is the plague of death. Those are God's descriptions, terms of Shaul. But when you read this, what it says is that Paul knowingly and deliberately lied. And he lied about something that has cost, it's probably 100 million Jews their dignity, their freedom, and their very lives. And that his lie has cost tens of billions of Christians their souls. It is the single greatest crime that has ever been perpetrated on humanity, and the crime is astonishingly obvious. And that's one of the reasons why it's hard to read this. It's hard to read the words of a demon-possessed man like Paul. Blatantly and knowingly lie when you know the consequence of that lie. But then when you realize that there have been millions of Christian theologians, and not one of them has been willing to hold him accountable when it's obvious he lied.
Yeah.
Makes me madder still. I mean, it just should make you want to scream at the Roman Catholic Church, at Orthodox Christianity, at the evangelicals and Protestant Christians, for having all those Bible schools and all those seminaries.
Bible studies. Yeah.
And in the end, there isn't one goddamn Christian in the lot that will hold this scumbag accountable when it is so blatantly obvious that he lied. Why is that? Well, here's the lie. We actually covered this in the last program, but it makes me so damn mad. By the way, damn is not a swear word. It's not a curse word. It is a perfectly good word. Yahweh uses it all the time. The damned in Hebrew is azab. It means to forsake, to leave destitute, to abandon, goddamn religion is God abandons the religious.
Yeah, separate from.
Right. To separate from. God raised him from the dead. No, he didn't. He doesn't even have him's name in here, and there certainly was no Jesus. There is no Christ. Yahshua was not the Mashiach. God raised him from the dead. No, he didn't. The body died. The soul didn't die. God cannot die. The body died as the Passover lamb. It was incinerated that night in accordance with Passover.
Thus no decay.
Therefore, God didn't die. The soul didn't die. The soul went into Sheol to suffer separation from God so we wouldn't have to, thereby perfecting us. And there was absolutely no one raised from the dead. To raise somebody from the dead, from Pauline point of view, is their physical body. The physical body of Yahshua was long gone. It had been destroyed that night. It served as the Passover lamb. The Passover lamb is never resurrected. The sacrifice of the Passover lamb is so that we can become immortal, not so that it can become immortal. That would be really stupid. Hey, what I want you to do is you go make the sacrifice of this Passover lamb. By the way, it's not a sacrifice that you're being nourished by it. But I want you to sacrifice this Passover lamb so it can live forever. Huh? Yeah, you go kill it so it can live forever. Because the miracle I'm going to perform is you kill it, you eat it, and I will raise it from the dead after you've eaten it and killed it.
You don't have the lamb come back every year on Passover? I got 4 or 5 running around my backyard now.
Oh, you do, huh? I call them all lamb chop. A rack of lamb. There's rack of lamb. There's lamb chop. There's leg of lamb. I really like leg of lamb. You were delicious. Mm-hmm. Can't wait to do you again next year. But it'll be fun. You'll come back to life.
I'm sorry.
It's absurd. God raised him from the dead so that he will never be subject to decay. His body, as the Passover lamb, was not only subject to decay, it was incinerated. The instructions. What do you do, JB, after you've eaten the Passover meal? What do you do with the rest of the lamb?
Throw it on the fire.
That's right.
Until it's all burnt up, incinerated, right? Gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's about as decayed. You know, ashes to ashes, that's about as decayed as it could be, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So there is no instruction, there is no prophecy on the Passover lamb never seeing decay, because the instruction is exactly the opposite. And while I understand that as a Goyim Christian, you haven't taken enough time to read God's instructions in the Torah to know that. Shame on you, but you're just ignorant.
Yeah, there's the crime.
But guess what? Well, that is a crying shame, to be ignorant, because your soul is going to pay the price for your ignorance. But Paul claimed to be the best student of the best teacher of the Torah. He can't claim ignorance. And he's claiming to actually quote God, and he's actually contradicting him. And then he says, as God has said, I will give you the holy and sure blessings promised to David. God didn't say that. And if he did, why would you trust him? If God, let's just say that God had this religion, that he was going to create this religion of Christianity, and then he decides, I don't like Christians, I want to give them to the Muslims, so that God gave the promises that he had given to the Christians to the Muslims. If you were a Muslim, would you trust him?
No.
So if God gave all these promises to the Jews, and now the Jews said, well, he transferred all these promises to us, the Goyim church, why would you trust him?
Why would you trust this guy?
He couldn't be trusted to honor his promises to the Jews. Why would you trust him? Are you an idiot? Now, if God said all of these things to Dowd, what I'm doing right now in the 6th chapter, just very close to being finished with it, of coming home in our time is I'm actually going through the 6 or 7 references to the second coming of Dowd, where God is implicit. He just says, when I return, or when I bring Israel back into the land and restore her, when Israel comes to appreciate who I am, calls me by name, at that time I'm going to bring the branch, the shepherd, the king back, and he's Dowd. And it's all over. I mean, it's in every major prophetic book. And so I'm going through these, and if that's all a lie, if none of that's going to happen, if all of the promises that Yahweh made to Dowd are untrue, if they have been given to someone else, then God's a deceptive, duplicitous, capricious, undependable liar.
Untrustworthy. Yeah, absolutely.
Not a God that I want to spend my eternity with. Not a God that anyone's going to spend their eternity with, because you can't trust him.
Hey, but
why would he do that? What is the... Just think of it for a moment. If Yosha is more than just the Passover lamb, if the Yosha is the diminished manifestation of Yahweh, and, for 3 years when the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him, and for the time that he served as the Passover lamb, he was a diminished manifestation of Yahweh. Why would you take everything that you had offered to the epitome of your creation, Dowd? Dowd is the literal essence of the reason why Yahweh created the universe, conceived the covenant, conveyed the Torah, and fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Bokurim, and Shabuah. He's the reason. God wanted a son. He wanted a family. Dowd is the guy who figured it out and was willing to share it with the rest of us. If you, as Yahweh, have found the man among all of humans that is the most pleasing to you, and you tell us that this is the guy that you chose because he is the most pleasing, the most ideal, the most correct, the most beneficial in every way to you. And you even say that when he comes back, he's going to be as brilliant as the sun. You say that when he comes back, he's going to be as God. About Dowd, why would you give that great celebration of your relationship with this man to many-me, to a diminished manifestation of yourself, that you would have had regardless of what you did in your interactions with man?
Right, sure. No necessary.
Great gifts I'm going to give you. It's going to be awesome. You're going to love it. You know what? I'm going to keep it for myself.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. It's absolutely ludicrous. And the further you drive the point that Yosha was more than a diminished manifestation of Yahweh and the Passover lamb, if you were to take it anywhere near where Christians take it, and, he's the living embodiment of God, then it becomes even more absurd for God to say, I'm going to give to me what I gave to him. I'm going to take everything I gave to him away and give it to me. But, by the way, what would be the purpose of giving it to yourself?
Yeah. Well, you're
going to crown yourself king? You're the creator of the universe. You're going to crown yourself king? You're the creator of the universe. You're going to crown yourself Messiah? You're the creator of the universe. Are you going to call yourself the branch? You're the creator of the universe. You're going to call yourself beloved son?
It almost sounds
What's wrong with these
disgusting,
people? Yes. It's so absurd. And as God has said, I will give you the holy and sure blessings promised to Dowd. Now, let's just say that you're not rational and you can't figure out just how stupid any of that is. Raising him from the dead, that would mean that God died and that bodily resurrection is somehow beneficial, when bodily resurrection is the world's dumbest idea. It is so utterly counterproductive. Finally, you get rid of the body, and now it's just your soul. You are liberated from everything that is a constraint on this earth. And when you want to go back to being constrained again, are you crazy? Burdened by the physical constraints of a body? And that never subject to decay when the Passover lamb is destroyed after you've eaten, the unedible parts are destroyed. And then God says, I'll give you the blessings that I promised to Dowd to him, mini-me. And then, of course, there's the killer of all killers. Why don't you go find a place that says, and I will give you the holy and sure blessings promised to Dowd. I will give you a lifetime. In fact, I will give the entire Christian church 2,000 years. Go find where God said that. And when you can't find where God said that, admit that Paul lied. You know, I understand that they call it faith because it can't be proved, because it can easily be disproved. And if something can be thus readily disproved, all you got left is faith.
I always tell people, faith is belief in something without proof.
Hopeful.
Now, I can somewhat understand that concept, but belief in something despite proof, that's
stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid. It's just stupid. And it's your soul at stake, and the souls of your children. They claimed, and we covered it last week, that statement was somehow found in Yahowah. They don't know that term, but Isaiah 55. So I'll just read through it again, just because, we're here, and we'll press on from here. It says, "Behold, I have given him as an eternal witness." Behold, him. Pay attention. I have given him. Nathan, who? As an eternal witness, Ed, to provide restoring testimony forever to the people of the nations who are governed by antiquated philosophies, leoma. A worthy leader, negid, to instruct the nations mired in the past, leom. That's what it reads. Now, you don't find it obviously in Yahowah 55:4, so let's go to 55:5 and 6. "Behold, and pay attention, you shall be called out, invited, and summoned, kara, by a goy Gentile you do not know. Further, a goy Gentile not known by you shall chase after you on account of Yahweh your God, and also on behalf of the set apart of Yisrael. For indeed, in truth, he will lift you up and endow you with honor. Choose to seek Yahweh while he may be found. Choose to call upon him while he is near." I don't recall Paul quoting any part of that, did he?
Nope.
Nope, didn't fit his agenda. Well, it goes on. The next part, the next thing that Paul wanted his suckers to believe is, so it is stated elsewhere. Oh, so where is it going to be stated elsewhere? It's going to be stated elsewhere. You will not let your Holy One see decay. Acts 13:35. Now, once again, Paul is usurping what was said of Dowd and applying it to his Jesus, thereby discrediting the Son of God and the Messiah. This is actually a citation from the 16th Mizmor Psalm, where Dowd is the sole author, the subject, speaker, and beneficiary. And by the way, it's a statement where Shaul himself is named. It begins, an engraving of Dowd. Keep your focus on me and be observant, closely examining and carefully considering what I'm doing, because in you, God, I confide, and I rely, placing my trust. The song continues. I will commend Yahweh, who provides me with advice and counsel. By the way, it's an interesting, seldom considered thought. You know the term Melech, that Yahweh was constantly referring to Dowd as his Melech? Do you know Melech, in addition to meaning royal ruler and leader,
Counselor.
means counselor and advisor.
Yeah. Yes.
Yahweh, who provides me, so the greatest advisor and counselor in world history, got his counsel and advice from Yahweh. It's no wonder that he was really good at it.
Good thinking.
Yeah, good thinking.
Explains a lot.
That Dowd's good.
Yeah.
That Dowd is good, ain't
Yeah, he's on his game there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
boy.
keeping me informed so that I can think properly. Even during the night, my inner nature, where I discern between right and wrong, instructs and corrects me. I've taken to doing that a lot. I've taken to doing a number of things that Dowd did, and it's really, been very helpful for me. One of them is I go to bed pondering some of the things that I translated and wrestling with them and their possibilities during the night. And then, Dowd said, first thing in the morning, I get up and I'm ready to go. I go right at it first thing in the morning. Now, before 6 o'clock in the morning, you'll find me, I'm sitting here in this chair. I'm translating, I'm writing commentary. It's my favorite time. I will do it for 2 or 3 hours before I've done anything other than, take the dog out to stretch her legs and have a cup of coffee. And, I strongly recommend doing what Dowd said here. Focus on him and pay careful attention to what he's doing. Even during the night, in my inner nature where I discern between right and wrong, it instructs and corrects me. I have continually and intensely desired to set Yahweh before me, seeking to be like him. Now, do you ever hear Paul say, I have set Yahweh before me? You ever been Paul that says,
Nope.
I want you to focus on me and be observant, examining and carefully considering what I'm doing. Because if you carefully considered what Paul is doing, you'd realize he's a lying scumbag. But not the case with Dowd. And of course, Paul wants you to place your trust in him. Dowd is saying, no, I think really you ought to trust the one that Yahweh. I confide in, Yahweh. I have continually and intensely desired to set Yahweh before me, seeking to be like him, because by me being right, I shall never waver and fail. Now, that's really an interesting thought, because a lot of people have trouble with Dowd because Dowd had some rascally behaviors. But yet he's a man that sought to be like Yahweh. So therefore, there's two things that have to be true in this. One is that his comment that here about the fact that he is devoted to being right, that has to be central to Yah's nature, being right, being correct, being trustworthy, being dependable. And indeed it is. And that's what made Dowd most like Yah. But Dowd is also like Yah in the sense that he is very conversant. He's constantly sharing what we need to know so that we can know and understand Yahweh. So Dowd and Yahweh are very, very similar in that regard. But there's other things about Dowd. He was a shepherd. Yahweh likes the idea of shepherding his sheep. That's his title. El means that he's a shepherd of sheep. If you look at the ancient characters that comprise the word. even if you look at the term for father, it's a ram's head in the home. And so Dowd was a shepherd. Yah was a shepherd. Dowd was a fighter. He didn't just go out and fight anybody. He fought to protect Yisrael. Yahweh fights to protect Yisrael. They're that way again. Dowd is a passionate guy. He will never, ever allow anyone to say something that is untrue that he won't attack it and expose it and condemn it. He is the antithesis of politically correct. Yah was the same thing.
He condemned himself once.
Yep.
Remember? And he said,
Absolutely.
You stole this lamb. This man stole this lamb, and he just jumped all over that. How dare this sucker do that? It was him. So
it was him.
You know, he knows. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's another thing they had in common. Dowd was a lover, passionate, driven by his mind, but amazingly emotional in a very rational way. Obviously, something that is similar to Yahowah. And, you know, you just go down through the list. There's so many things that Yahowah likes leading his people. So did Dowd. You know, I thought about it a number of times when it's, you know, God must say it 20 times that there's going to be a second coming of Dowd where Dowd comes back to be the king of Israel, not just during the millennial kingdom, forever. And I said, oh, my God, that poor guy. Why? That's just awful. You know, he's got to do this job forever. You know, the thing I'm looking forward to in eternity is not having any responsibility. I just want to, go out and let's go explore. Let's go have a picnic, you know. Yeah, let's go and you know, do better than the platypus. You know, let's go have some fun. Dowd's got to work. And when I made that statement, the person I was talking to just looked at me and said, you idiot. He loves this stuff.
Oh, yeah. That would be my answer. He absolutely has to love this stuff and does.
He loves this stuff. That's why when Shaul wrote this malarkey to strip everything away from him and give it to a phony, the Christian Jesus, Dowd is saying, why are you diminishing me this way? God made all these promises. I'm looking forward to doing this. And you've stripped me of all of it. Yeah, Dowd, yeah, he loved it. I don't understand why, but obviously he and Yahowah have very thick skin and can endure a lot of unsavory. I won't be unsavory things in eternity, so that part is probably true. But still, people are tough to manage. Mm-hmm. Therefore, as a result, my judgment is enlightened and uplifting. And the significant distinction and honorable reward associated with me will ecstatically delight. Now, that's pretty cool to be able to say that. I mean, can you imagine? I wouldn't go there in a billion years, but I'm delighted to hear that Dowd will. Therefore, as a result, my judgment is enlightened and uplifting, and the significant distinction and honorable reward associated with me will ecstatically delight. It's true. You read Dowd's Mizmor, and that's the result. My body and the good news I proclaim shall abide and remain, living confidently and established securely. Therefore, you will not abandon my soul to Shaul. Neither will you permit your trusting and devoted one to witness the prison of corruption and decay. You have revealed and made known to me that I understand the path to abundant and joyful life in your presence, being found agreeable and acceptable at your right side forever. Now, yes, the statement says, neither will you permit your trusting and devoted one to witness the prison of corruption and decay. It does say that, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But who is it? Who is the one talking? Who is the one that this is about from beginning to end? It's about Dowd.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it about Jesus?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, there is no fulfillment of matzah, there is no perfection, and therefore there is no salvation if Yosha's soul, Yahweh's soul, didn't endure Sheol.
That's right. Then we got no game.
Right, you got nothing. And so if the soul of Yahweh / Yosha did not endure matzah in Sheol, then there is no salvation. That's a real problem. That puts you back in the same plot that we've talked about so many times, that even if Christians got Passover right, which is the sacrifice of the Pesach lamb, which they don't, of course, but if they got it right, but they completely omit matzah, it's the worst possible outcome. You have eternal life, but eternally separated from God, which means an eternity in Sheol, the place of separation, the worst possible outcome. But what they're doing here is what Paul is saying here. If this applies to the Christian Jesus and not to Dowd, then what Paul is doing is condemning all humankind to be immortal and eternally separated from God, which means that everyone that would act upon this would spend eternity in Sheol, which is hell, the black hole, because they're robbing all who would listen of the benefits of matzah. You have revealed and made known to me such that I understand the path to an abundant and joyful life in your presence, being found agreeable and acceptable at your right side forever. It could not have been said of Yosha. This is all said of Dowd. And Dowd was the author. And the me, focus on me because I'm right, is Dowd.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's brilliant. It's truthfully, it's an enduring summation of the 89th Mizmor. As a matter of fact, when you talk about the Holy One, in Hebrew there is no holy, it's Kodesh, which means to be set apart.
Set apart, yeah.
Right. And the 89th Mizmor, which we studied not too many programs ago, Yahweh says specifically that Dowd is not only his chosen one, not only his firstborn, but also his set apart. So the set apart one is Dowd. That's what the 89th Mizmor is really clear. Dowd is the chosen one. He is the set apart one. He is also the Mashiach. He is also the King of Kings. Nowhere does it say, you will not let your Holy One see decay. It does not say anything about Yosha. And what it does say affirms that Dowd's life and lyrics matter while Paul remains the father of lies. It is baffling that anyone would choose to believe Paul over Dowd, or would discount the life of Dowd to follow Paul. In a statement that we know Yahweh personally inspired, Dowd wrote, "You have revealed and made known to me such that I understand the path to an abundant and joyful life in your presence, being found agreeable and acceptable at your right side forever." Well, wouldn't you, having read that, having listened to that, want to avail yourself of whatever it is that Dowd came to know and understand? He's saying that what leads to eternal life is what has been revealed to and made known to him, Dowd. read the Mizmor. And stop reading Paul's epistles. Dowd provided the means to an abundant and joyful life in Yahweh's presence, being found agreeable and acceptable at his right side forever. A decaying Dowd whose value was limited to a single generation is the stuff of Satan's dreams. This is now Acts 13:36 and 13:37. Now, when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. He was buried with his ancestors, and his body decayed. But the one whom God raised from the dead did not see decay.
We know that's a lie.
Well, more than a lie. What this says is that Dowd only mattered to his generation.
Mm-hmm.
What this said is, which means you're negating every prophetic promise that God made about this man, about what he just said, that his words lead to eternal life, to an agreeable and acceptable position, and a great abundance at God's right side. You're negating that. You're negating the places in Ezekiel, in Yirmiah, in Yeshaya, in Hosea, and throughout the Psalms, where Yahweh specifically says that Dowd is going to come back and be the king and shepherd of his people forever. It even says in the second Mizmor that Yahweh is going to awaken Dowd from his sleep for this very purpose of being the King of Kings, of being the eternal and everlasting King of his people. And you have the Passover lamb not seeing decay, which would negate his entire service, because he can't be the Passover lamb if he isn't wholly Torah observant. Beyond all of that, and that's a lot, Paul, who is a Gnostic, who hates the flesh and created this religion on the spirit is good and the flesh is bad, which isn't so. There are bad spirits and good spirits, and Yahweh calls the animals that he created, including humanity, good. So every aspect of Gnosticism is wrong. But with Paul being a Gnostic, his entire diatribe in favor of the body not decaying of Yosha is a direct contradiction with Gnosticism. The physical body is never good. It is always decaying. And oh, by the way, that is the nature of bodies. All bodies decay. In fact, all things material go from order to disorder. Second law of thermodynamics.
Mm-hmm.
So, his very statement is absurd. And oh, by the way, when Yosha had the skin and the sinew of his back and his legs ripped off by the Roman flagellum, do you think that was some decay?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a little degradation there? When he was nailed to that upright post and all of his energy degraded, he could no longer breathe, fluid filled his lungs, and the body finally succumbed, and the body died. Would you say that's decay?
I would. And you can find it all in the 22nd Psalm.
All of it. There is an eyewitness to all of this, and it happens to be Dowd.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
That's why Yosha quoted Dowd when he was his last words on the upright pole. He was quoting Dowd. Now, if Dowd isn't essential, why is Yosha quoting him? According to Shaul, Dowd served a purpose which lasted 1,000 years prior. Fell asleep and was buried, and what left of him has decayed. But that would not be the case with the one. The problem with that, of course, is that Yahweh said that Dowd served as an eternal witness. I mean, we've just read that passage where it says that, Dowd is an eternal witness, and that he will serve as the King of Kings, that he's going to rule over the earth and always retain a throne in heaven. Dowd's leadership and kingdom isn't just during the millennial Shabbat, which is a long time, 1,000 years. It's forever. God even said that Dowd would appear as brilliant as the sun in his presence, which is pretty much the antithesis of decay. There's a place in Zechariah where God says that Dowd will be as God. Well, that's pretty much the antithesis of decay.
That's called high cotton where I come from.
Yeah. Well, as the Passover lamb, Yosha's body was incinerated right after having fulfilled its purpose. He was therefore neither raised from the dead nor bodily resurrected. Decay is the eventual result of every physical body, which is one of the many reasons they aren't resurrected. It would be counterproductive. And yet, all of this was designed to make Dowd, the Son of God and the Messiah, inferior to the man God, Paul, was promoting. Instead of protecting Jews, Paul's God deplored them. And make no mistake, Paul wasn't speaking on behalf of nor serving Yosha. He not only twisted and perverted everything that Yosha stood for,
Okay.
he never once actually quoted anything Yosha said. Not once in 14 epistles did Paul quote something that Yosha actually said. Dowd is speaking for Yahweh. He quotes Yahweh. Every one of the prophets speaking for Yahweh quote Yahweh. Here is Paul saying that he is the representative to the entire world for his Jesus, and he never once quotes him. If he never once quotes him, could he be his representative?
No, hardly.
Yeah, could you be the apostle of Jesus and never once convey anything that he said? Impossible. According to Yahweh, Dowd's purpose will endure forever. He will always be at Yahweh's right side. He will be returning with Yahweh to serve as God's shepherd. For all time, he will remain Yahweh's Messiah and the King of Israel. He is God's beloved Son. He is the chosen one. Moreover, in the third Mizmor Psalm, the one that Shaul was twisting here, once again to serve his purpose, this is what it says. Yahweh, what is the extent of the increasing number of my adversaries and of the unfavorable situation my enemies have managed to perpetrate, especially with the overtly hostile attempts at diminishing my significance? The majority of people rise up, many of whom are established, honored, and powerful, standing fast against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him or through him with God. Pause and consider this. You, Yahweh, are a shield all around me and my source of deliverance. You have provided the gift of protection for me, surrounding me such that others may benefit from the same directions and path. You are my manifestation of power, my attribution of status, everything I value and respect, and the one raising my prominence from the very beginning. I communicate audibly by calling out to Yahweh, and he answers me, providing testimony and evidence for me on account of his set-apart mountain. Pause and consider this as well. I relax and fell asleep. When I awake, I will be revived and productive, passing through the summer roused and alive, taking action and bearing fruit, because Yahweh sustained and supported me, steadfastly focusing on me, such that I could lean on him for whatever was necessary. I will not revere, respect, nor fear the great multitude of people who from all around have taken up positions on the perimeter and have set themselves up against me. I want you to choose to take a stand, Yahweh. Elect to assist me in being desirous of saving me, such that you enable me to be helpful in the same way, causing me to become an expression of your will, while becoming ever more like you, a Savior, my God. For indeed, you will strike, verbally afflicting and then crippling all of those who are averse to me, against those demonstrating animosity and rancor toward me, smashing and shattering the jawbone of the unrighteous and unjust, the troubling and vexing. Approach and draw near, Yahweh, for the salvation of your family and for your benefit. Take a moment and reflect on this. Mizmor 3:8. Is there any place there where God said, now when David had served his purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep and he was buried with his ancestors and his body decayed? But the one whom God raised from the dead did not see decay?
To the contrary.
Exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. So why are there any Christians when the founder of your religion was such a liar? Yeah.
Didn't you say Shamar Torah like we've been doing that forever? And
yes.
If you don't Shamar the Torah, you have no clue. And
God has two instructions. Observe what I have written. Listen to what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
There's no instructions on praying, bowing down, worship. There's two instructions. Right. Listen to what I have to say. Now, if you want to have what Yahweh had to say, don't you think you need to go to a place where Yahweh speaks in first person?
Where he said
or where the person speaking of him quotes him and speaks passionately about him? Wouldn't you go if you wanted to know Yahweh? Wouldn't you go to someone who uses Yahweh's name? Who writes in Yahweh's name?
Yes.
I would think so. Well, this Mizmor demonstrates that Paul was wrong once again about Dowd, discounting the fact that he will rise again and return with Yahweh. It's this line which undermines Shaul and the religion he fathered. Many are saying of my soul, there's no salvation for him or through him with God. When I first came to realize that Paul's line on the Torah cannot save, the first thing I recognized is, well, if the Torah can't save, then Dowd's in hell. David's in hell. God's beloved son, the one God said, he is my son, I am his father. The one that Yahweh anointed as the Messiah 3 times. The one that God said, my spirit came upon him and never left him. The one that God said, he is the shepherd of my people. The one God said, I am choosing him. The one that said, he's going to be just like me. The one I am bringing back to be the King of Kings. And you want to tell me that Dowd's in hell because the Torah can't save? Didn't Dowd say, you can't keep me out of heaven because I'm coming with the Torah, I'm carrying it with me?
Yes.
And yet, for Pauline Christianity to be true, the Torah can't save. If the Torah can't save, Dowd's in hell. So if Dowd is is in writings that we can prove were inspired by Yahweh. And Dowd is called right and vindicated and God's eternal king. Then the Torah can obviously save. And therefore the basis of Christianity is clearly wrong. And it all comes down to who you're going to believe, Paul or Dowd. Who's telling the truth? Because they're opposites. Who are you going to believe? In fact, if you don't even like that game, if you don't like that contest between Dowd and Shaul, then why don't you have the same contest between Shaul and Yosha? Because they're opposites too.
Yes. And what do you do with Pesach and Matzah and Bikurim that Moshe said? What do you think that was all about if it wasn't for that reason? I mean, it's a ridiculous concept.
No, Paul actually said if you're circumcised, you can't be saved.
Yeah.
And Yahweh says if you're not circumcised, you can't be saved. You know, Yahweh says if you're not circumcised as a man, you can't enter heaven. Yahweh says if you're not circumcised as a man, you can't partake in Passover. He's not being mean in that regard, but if you're not part of the covenant, Passover would make you immortal and eternally separated from God. Yeah, God's being incredibly loving and compassionate by saying that. Exactly the opposite. You know, Paul wrote about all governments are inspired by God. They're all put in place and authorized by God. They're all there for good. And yet, you've got 2.5 billion people on the planet, and they weren't able to see that that was proven to be untrue when Rome went in and destroyed the temple in 70 AD, when Rome returned back and absolutely wiped out Yahudah, all Jews off into slavery.
Tore down the temple,
when
stole everything.
When the Christian church, the Roman Catholic Church, was created on the basis of despising Jews so that their God allegedly turned on them and reneged on all of his promises to them and transferred all those promises to Gentiles and the church instead. And then when you have governments as vile as Imperial Rome, governments as vile as those in the Holy Roman Empire, governments as vile as were imposed by popes, governments as vile as Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany, and Paul said all governments are agents of God for good. But when that happened, and it's right in the middle of Romans, Paul's most important book, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that the man lied. Returning to Shaul, Paul, the son of evil, proclaimed, "Therefore, my friends," these are the very people he's condemning to death, "I want you to know through Jesus the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. Through him, everyone who believes is set free from every sin, a jurisdiction you were not able to obtain under the law of Moses." Well, if the Torah of Moshe, which is actually the Torah of Yahweh, was not able to save a person, to justify a person from every sin, then you got a problem, because Dowd said he had more faults than he had hairs on his head. And yet God said he was vindicated and right. But what if you go one step further? What if the Torah has in it a sin from which there is no salvation? Is there a sin in the Torah that the Torah says, if you do this, I cannot and will not save you? There is no salvation for someone who does this. Is there anything like that?
Well, there is if you continually do it. This first tablet gives you 3. Yeah. But that's
third statement of the first tablet.
Stop.
Yeah. It says that if you make a habit, because it was written in the imperfect, if you continue to diminish the value of my name, doing so in a deceitful fashion, then I will not forgive you. For all of those who deceive in such a way that it negates the value of my name, I will not forgive. He etched it in stone. And you couldn't do more harm to Yahweh's name than Roman Catholicism and Christianity. They wrote his name out of his own testimony 7,000 times. They renamed the Pesach lamb from Yahusha, Yahweh saves, to the name of a Greek god, Jesus. The Roman Catholic Church even went so far as to say the name Yahweh may not be used in any event associated with us. You could not do more harm to Yahweh's name than was done by these fools, and that is the lone unforgivable sin in the Torah. Now, if believing in Jesus could forgive you of that sin, then God's a liar.
Yes.
So, I want to know where God said, all you have to do is to believe in me, and all of your sins are forgiven. Where'd God say that?
You're going to give him a lifetime again on this one as well?
Yeah, I'll give you a lifetime. In fact, why don't you find a place where Yahweh spoke through one of his prophets, so that Yahweh gives you a test as to who he spoke through. It's twice presented in Devarim, Deuteronomy. You go check it out if you're not aware of it. Why don't you go and find any prophetic statement through any one of Yahweh's prophets where God said that you can be forgiven for every sin so long as you believe in Jesus. In fact, I'll make it even easier. Why don't you find Jesus even mentioned? Got $1 billion here. You find Jesus written anywhere. I wish I had $1 billion. I can wager $1 billion because I can't lose it. Why don't you find a place where there's a prophecy regarding Jesus? There isn't one. Why don't you find a place where even if there was, okay, we'll forget he doesn't have a name. God doesn't know his name. He uses Dowd's name 1,000 times, but Yosha never used his name once. So, let's just pretend that God had a senior moment and forgot his name. Why don't you find a place where forgot his name is presented as the source of forgiveness for all sins based upon believing in him? If this is the essence of God's message, why didn't he say so?
Because he didn't.
If there is something that Jesus can do that the Torah cannot do, then why did Yosha say that he came to fulfill the Torah and not a single letter or stroke of a letter of the Torah shall be annulled for as long as the heavens and earth exist?
How do you get around that one? You can't get around that one.
You can't. God has made it abundantly clear that the opposite of this is true. Jesus did not proclaim the forgiveness of sins. In fact, apart from the Torah's presentation of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, his sacrifice is irrelevant. And speaking of irrelevant, so are beliefs. What is it that Christians are called to believe? That Paul can be relied upon? That God cannot be trusted? That the Torah cannot save, but faith can? How does one believe Jesus and at the same time disavow the Torah and pervert the prophets, both of which he affirmed? How can anyone believe Paul when it's so obvious he's lying? How does Jesus save? By dying? By allowing his people to kill him? By hanging from a Roman cross so as to create a religious icon? If the God who sent him cannot be trusted, how can this man God be any better? How do you go about believing someone whose name you don't even know, whose ethnicity you abhor, whose statements you negate, whose stated purpose you annul? If Yahshua is the Passover lamb, the salvation he is providing emanates from the Torah. If he is not the Passover lamb, Yahweh and Yahshua are untrustworthy, and there's no reason for Yahshua's sacrifice on this mikvah.
No, wait.
In his Torah guidance, first in Shemot, Exodus, and then in Devarim, Deuteronomy, Yahweh delineated. Yes, I think I've been intoxicated with coffee. Delineated a sin, which he said was unforgivable, denying and denigrating the merit of his name. Paul and all of those he misled are guilty of committing this unpardonable act, negating the value of Yahweh's name by erroneously calling Yahshua, Yahweh liberates, rescues, and saves, Jesus Christ. And let's be clear, there is no law of Moses. The Torah teaching is Yahweh's and is his source of guidance and instruction. It is also God's lone means to save. As proof, consider what Dowd wrote in the 19th of Isbor. Now, I'm going to tell you, I cherish, benefit, am enriched and empowered by what Dowd wrote. And there's very few things that are as powerful as what we're about to read. On behalf of the eternal and glorious one, a Mizmor, Psalm of Dowd. The heavens quantify the unit of measure exactly and accurately of the manifestation of power, glorious presence, and overall significance of God. Its expanse and its expansion make known his conspicuous handiwork. Day unto day pours out a proliferation of answers, words in their intent. Night unto night reveals knowledge, which leads to understanding. Nothing exists, and everything is senseless without the word, without these answers and promises. Nothing survives. Nothing matters when and where the spoken and written message of the voice which calls out is corrupted or negated, when it becomes nameless and is no longer heard, regarded, or understood. Yahweh's Torah, his teaching and guidance, is complete and perfect, restoring and transforming the soul. Yahweh's testimony is trustworthy and reliable, making understanding simple for the open-minded. Yahweh's directions are correct, promoting a right attitude while facilitating good judgment. Yahweh's terms and conditions, the codicils of his covenant, are purifying, illuminating the proper perspective. Revering and respecting Yahweh purifies and perfects forever. Yahweh's just means to resolve disputes are reliable and vindicating. Mizmor Psalm 19, 1 through 3 and 7 through 9. I was watching a show last night, middle of the night. I woke up kind of startled and couldn't sleep, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I used to turn on the History Channel, and I used to call it the Sleeping Channel. History Channel could always put me to sleep because they just had so many wild things on there that just were silly. But now it's become the Science Channel that puts me to sleep. And there was Mike Rowe was the narrator, and it was, the beginning of the universe, and they were talking about the Big Bang. And they're saying, oh, yeah, Big Bang, man, it's proven fact now. There's just some minor details we don't understand. Like, where did all the matter come from that created the universe? Oh, the answer to that is simple. E equals mc squared. It was all energy. Oh, well, where did the energy come from, Nimrod? Well, then all of this energy was all constrained into something as small as the head of a pin. Well, dummy, what happens when you pull a lot of matter and energy into a single point? Don't you get a black hole?
Yep.
How
are you going to create the energy, the universe from a black hole? An explosion? What good is an explosion if the gravity won't allow it to be released? It holds it all in. If light can't escape because the gravity is so enormous, wouldn't you have just created the world's largest black hole if all you had was a lot of concentrated energy? Why can't they, they have this Big Bang, so they want to show you an explosion, but if all of that energy was concentrated in that small a space, no energy that's leaving, gravity would be too great. Then they said, we also have to have in the first, it used to be just tiny fraction of a second, massive expansion where everything expanded radically faster than the speed of light. I said, well, fundamental fact of science, nothing can move faster than the speed of light. In fact, matter can't even approach the speed of light. But energy can only move at the speed of light. I said, not a problem. It wasn't moving away faster than the speed of light. It was the space between these things that was expanding. Say what? And then they said, what caused it to expand? We don't know. But what we know is that it stopped expanding at that pace. Why did it do that? Well, we don't know. And then when they have all of it, they don't want to tell you that, oh, by the way, all of our math only works if we add 94% more energy and matter into the equation than we could even identify. That we're only aware of 6% of it. But there has to be, just awesome amounts more to make everything work. It was this just enormous comedy of men pretending to be smart. When
you realize that this is another, show you will not be invited on.
Yes. And ask me if I care. So Dowd is explaining how the universe was expanding. Dowd was explaining, how it's obvious that there was a cause and effect. And I want to give Roy credit because he was really the one that helped me understand this. Is that the whole idea of dimensionality and how a being in the seventh dimension can create a six-dimensional realm or universe with absolute ease and not take anything away from himself. And how that relates to, Walt Disney creating Flatland, a two-dimensional realm for Mickey and Minnie Mouse. And yet, the beings that you create, even if they were living, which of course they aren't, they would have no concept of any dimension beyond those that they are created in. and how really easy the universe is to understand when you understand the dimensionality of the whole thing, and how time itself is a dimension, and how Hebrew words are liberated in time, and how Yahweh refers to himself as light, and yet the very language he uses to communicate is equivalent to light. The whole thing is just so brilliant, and obviously Dowd understood it well before Einstein made sense of it all for us. Anyway, that Bisbor 19 is music to my ears. The words of a true prophet are so much sweeter than the sour chords of a false one. Now, since Paul has acknowledged that David served God's purpose, even for a single generation, and since Dowd's words and Paul's are wholly incompatible, indeed the antithesis of one another, there is no way to rationally construe Paul as having told the truth. Pause now and think about that. The father of lies was so arrogant that he would often insult his audience, believing that no matter how obvious he made it, that no one would bother to fact-check his citations, and thus recognize that he was an impostor. The prophecy in Habakkuk he quotes next to intimidate and cower those who were easily frightened and readily conversed into believing him, was expressly written to do the opposite. It was written to prepare us for Shaul so we wouldn't be coerced or frightened by him, proving yet another instructive clue, providing one. 666 years before Shaul penned his first letter, sometime around 615 BCE, Yahweh chose a man named Habakkuk, embraced this, to expose and condemn an individual named Shaul, question him. God's concern was that this heinous man would lure billions of souls back into Babylon by negating his Torah and replacing his covenant. That wasn't actually God's biggest concern. What do you think God's biggest concern was about Paul and why he wanted to condemn him? It's not that he caused tens of billions of Gentile souls to be excluded from heaven. That's a big crime, but that's not the biggest crime. What's the biggest crime that Paul committed? Pardon?
He hurt Israel.
Yes.
He turned the world against them.
That's correct. That's a far bigger crime. As the father of Israel, the father of the covenant that was created for Israel, when Paul turned on his children and caused the world of Gentiles to despise, to abuse, to debase, and then to annihilate his children, that was the single worst thing that he or anyone could do. And so that's the greatest crime.
Well, they're never going to read the Torah, or we're never going to read the Torah, and the fact that where would they get one to read it? So when he said, that there's no way for them to fact check, he made sure they couldn't fact check, because when you isolate,
that's not actually true. The Torah prophets and Psalms had been translated into Greek. He is writing in Greek. He is speaking in Greek.
Oh, okay.
So somebody that would understand Greek would absolutely have a translation of the Greek Septuagint. Now, the Greek Septuagint was not a very good translation, and they all differed from one another, and so they weren't reliable. But at least you could use them to fact check against Shaul. You could find that nothing that Shaul said was true. And it's not that he just misquoted God, but that in every case what Shaul said God had said was actually the opposite of what God had said. And so you could prove that very easily using the Septuagint. Now, that's not everybody. Okay. Not everybody would have access to a copy. Books were enormously expensive. Not everybody was literate. But the early church fathers were all literate. They all had copies of these things. Every one of them could have fact-checked them, and none of them did. Shame on them. Take care. As is now, I should say, Paul's obviously this like a moth he's drawn to the fire. He could not leave it alone. The prophet that he most often cited is the one who called him out by name, labeling Shaul as the plague of death, while at the same time renouncing everything that Paul would come to represent. Anyway, this is Acts 13:40 and 41. Take care that what the prophets have said does not happen to you. Look, you scoffers, wonder and perish. For I am going to do something in your days that you would never believe, even if someone told you. Paul is saying, you scoff. He realized they're scoffing at him. Wonder and perish. He wants those who are scoffing at him to die. Because I, Paul, am going to do something in your days that you would never believe, even if someone told you. Now that's arrogant, or more correctly, psychotic and delusional. The seldom considered prophetic witness of the son of evil has just upended to cast aspersions on his audience. The very thing he was quoted was actually written to warn an unwary world about Paul. An accurate version is found in Habakkuk 1:5. In context, God's warning began with these words. This prophetic pronouncement regarding the relationship was received as a revelation by Habakkuk, embrace this, the prophet. For how long and why, Yahweh, should I vocalize this request for help? In the midst of this desperately horrible situation, since you are not going to listen for an ongoing period of time to my appeal. Directed towards you, there will be cruel lies and great injustice with Torahlessness and error leading to death and destruction. As a result, you will continuously withhold salvation. Since it is such a distressing and abysmal state of affairs that you are evaluating, what is the reason you are having me witness and consider this evil corruption, this gross perversion and troubling twisting of the truth? Cruel lies and grotesque errors are ruining the people, plundering them, and they are conspicuous to me, and they're related from my perspective. He has been and continues to be contentious, taunting and quarrelsome, even insulting, by harboring a perception which put God in conflict with man. He is continuously advocating dissension, providing a source of contention with regard to anyone exercising good judgment regarding vindication. Accordingly, he has sought to completely implicate and invalidate the purpose of the Torah. He remains unwilling to acknowledge or advocate the unending and everlasting means to exonerate by justly resolving disputes, and of exercising good judgment regarding the plan to resolve these issues. For indeed, this evil has become an all-encompassing, openly averse and hostile diatribe against those who are correct. Clearly, his judgment regarding his means to salvation is perverted and distorted, such that it is completely twisted and false. Habakkuk 1:4. And we haven't even gotten to the good part yet. But just imagine that God told this prophet
666 years.
Yeah, before he would write his first word in his epistle to the Galatians.
Galatia.
Yeah, that this man would make all of these false claims, this one guy, and he's going to name him as Shaul.
Mm-hmm. I have a quick little question. In 1:2, doesn't the Torahlessness there, doesn't that allow us to call him the Torahless one?
Yes, absolutely.
Isn't that a reference to that? I would think.
Yes, yes.
So
and being the Torahless one, who that is. Yeah. The person that Christians refer to as the Antichrist, he's really the Torahless one, and the Torahless one is Paul.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for the Antichrist, he's Paul. There he is. He's Paul. He has already been here, which means
and labeled.
That to whatever degree the revelation prophecies of the Torahless one are true, the Torahless one's going to be Paul. Now, that doesn't mean that it's Paul is going to be resurrected. No, it's not that at all. It's just that the demon that possessed Paul, that caused all of these lies and arrogance and deceptions, could be the exact same demon. So that demon is coming back, and the personality is going to be indistinguishable from Paul. The testimony is going to be indistinguishable from Paul. So, very serious problem for Christians. Paul is the Torahless one, and there's no doubt about that. You don't need Shabbat to tell you that he's the Torahless one. All you've got to do is read what Paul said about the Torah. He openly condemns it, negates it, and annuls it. Says it can't save. I think that's a good place to leave it. We'll pick this up really kind of in the same place a week from now. And I could hear that it appears that Terry made it back up into room 7 in the hospital. Yes. She's out of ICU.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
So let's hope that their second attempt to remove the infection works. I know that it's really a sad situation where that they had, they removed cancer from her digestive tract where you have the most infection, and yet she is, antibiotics are counterproductive in her system. And so it's a really,
a lot of allergies to them.
So it's really a tough situation. Yeah, so you're in a situation where you're removing and cutting away the digestive tract, which is by its very nature filled with bacteria.
The filter for all this stuff. Yeah.
And then you have somebody that is susceptible to allergic reactions to antibiotics. It's a kind of a cruel situation.
It is. Yeah, it's pretty rough. So that's been basically the situation, because she's doubly wounded because of the second operation and all these other things. So this may be it. She's better, so remarkably so, in the last few hours.
So the first operation was successful in removing the cancer, but unfortunately the doctor reconnected her digestive tract incorrectly, and so she was a month of having all of that bacteria and infection going in the wrong places, and rather than getting better after the cancer was removed, she got sicker. And then he admitted, give him the credit. He admitted, I made a mistake.
No, he stood up.
And he went in and corrected it. But that was as traumatic as the first operation. And then there was another operation after that to remove the infection that resulted in the second operation.
Procedure, but they're still under anesthesia, and you're still sticking tubes in people. In fact, she has 2 tubes coming out of her now, draining off this stuff, because that's the only way to get it out correctly. So that's pretty much where we are. Is working. What can we do now to? That's what we'll talk about tomorrow when he comes by. So.
Okay, and there's another one of those procedures yesterday.
One today, and then there was something earlier this week, earlier a few days ago. Yeah, it's just one thing after another. But this has been the most successful thing they've done from a standpoint of seeing her totally turn around. As far as she's still weak as can be, but I mean, as far as everything else, she actually feels good.
Yes.
And she hasn't said that for a long time.
That's good.
That's good.
Thank you, JB.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Well, yes. So, any case, we great stuff here, and the show is just wonderful. And this is
I'm delighted you could participate. I know that you're in the midst of hospital and the transfer, but it's one of the things where, like I told you, if you can, it's uplifting to listen to what Yahowah has to say. It's actually uplifting even to condemn those who have led so many astray, because for those who come to recognize that about Paul and they abandon the religion of Christianity because of him, then they really have a genuine opportunity to come to know Yahowah.
Mm-hmm.
And until that happens, they have none. So yes, you got to walk away first. So giving people a reason to walk away sets them in the right direction. So, and then we know the way that we prove that Paul lied is we share the words that Yahowah inspired, and they're always uplifting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, God.
Yeah, the comparison is one. Yeah, comparison is just absolutely.
Yeah. And we're on a subject. We've been on this subject for a long time, and I don't know how we're ever going to get off this subject, because it is the single most important subject to Yahowah, which is that the single most important personage in human history, the Messiah, the King of Kings, the branch, the shepherd, the Son of God, the firstborn, is Dowd. It's Dowd. And when we focus on what he had to say and why God made this choice regarding him, that we come to know who Yahowah is, what he's offering, what he wants in return, we come to understand what Dowd came to understand, the path to an abundant life and eternal life at God's right side. And particularly since Yahowah is so committed to the restoration of his relationship with his people, Dowd is essential, because he's going to lead that restoration.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say. So, when you're deceived into taking all of that away from Dowd and improperly giving it to a misnomer, Jesus Christ, you not only take away from Yahusha his purpose as the Pesach lamb, but you negate everything that God conveyed through his beloved Son. It's one of the great travesties, if not the greatest travesty of human history, because rather than realizing God's ongoing devotion to his people, you take everything away from them. You make God a liar, and all of a sudden the very people that God said, don't do what they do, don't pay attention to them, claim to be the beneficiaries of everything he promised in his oracle, his messengers to humankind. It's just devastating. So what were you going to say, Kirk?
Well, I was going to ask you one quick question, because Yochanan called Yahusha the Word of God, and you have Dowd, who actually wrote a lot. There's a lot of words out of Dowd, and then none out of Yahusha that we can really hang our hat on. We can speculate that some of the things were quoted, but that title, was that one that was absconded from Dowd as well?
Which specific title?
Because they always call him, he's the Word of God, he's the Word.
Oh, you're talking about where Yahuchanan opened his text. Yeah. The problem that you have with Yahuchanan's text is that he didn't write it in Greek. He didn't write it in Greek, and while there are more extant copies of it prior to the corruption of Eusebius and the Roman Catholic Church than any other text. It's also the most copy edited. Christian scribes were notorious for changing the text to reflect whatever the person paying them wanted them to say.
Yeah, especially Marcion. He was big on that stuff.
Yes, but Marcion didn't care for Yahuwah, and he only wanted the book of Luke, Acts, and Paul's letters was all that he promoted, which is just all Pauline, 100% Pauline rubbish. I don't have a problem with Yosha being called the word of Yahweh because unfortunately, what we don't have with Yahweh is our Yosha, any of the words that he spoke, or the language he spoke, or any of his words maintained by reliable scribes. So we don't have any of that. So it's hard to project, and also the few things that were likely written by eyewitnesses, like Levi, the disciple, probably was the one who wrote down, and according to Hebrews, the Sermon on the Mount. To that degree, he is the word of Yahweh. So I don't have any issue with that. But
so it's,
the person who wrote the most in terms of the word of Yahweh is Dowd. And Yahweh had more words to say about Dowd than anybody else. So Yahweh had more words devoted to Dowd than anyone else, and the person who wrote more words about God than anyone else was Dowd. So there is no question that Dowd is the word of God, and wrote the word of God.
But then the prophets can be called that too.
Yeah, and if you look at Yosha, he quotes Dowd's words.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yahweh quotes him too. Right, and Yahweh quotes Dowd's words, and Dowd never quotes Yosha's words.
No.
And Dowd is actually the only eyewitness to what Yosha,
really happened,
Yahweh, and the set-apart spirit, accomplished in 33 CE in the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, Bakudim, and Shavuot. The only eyewitness is for the whole experience is Dowd.
So it's taken centuries and centuries, and no one's put this together. That's just... it's great that you found it, and we all get to discuss it and study it, but my gosh, that is so sad.
It's so sad. It's so obvious, too.
You're using the same stuff that everybody else would do. You got the same story. Wow.
Well, none of this is hard to figure out. You just, you have to have the want-to. Is your mind open to the truth, and are you willing to go where the words lead? That's really the only skill set you have to bring.
Yeah, that is true.
Do you want to study it because you want to learn? Are you open-minded and rational in your approach? And are you willing to go where the words lead? If those three things are true, everybody on the planet would discover the same thing. Anybody that's interested in reading what Yahweh had to say, is open-minded, rational in their approach, and willing to go where the words lead, would come to exactly the same conclusion. It's just sad that there are so few people that meet those criteria.
Just a lack of caring. Gosh, how awful.
Yeah, a lack of caring. Yeah. And you think you'd care because for a number of reasons. One is there's really nothing more empowering, enriching, or fun than studying Yahweh's words. It's not a sacrifice. Second, your soul is at stake. Souls of those people you love. The more people you're able to enlighten because you've taken the time to learn this, the more valuable your life becomes. Why wouldn't there be more people doing this?
Beats the heck out of me, man. Beats the heck out of me.
I understand that for a lot of times It was hard to find a copy of Yahweh's testimony, and if you found one and you came to these conclusions, they would torture and kill you.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of incentive, but still, as Yahweh said, for century upon century upon century, millennia upon millennia, he looked for someone with whom he could work, and there was no one. He looked for someone through whom he could work, and there was no one. And it got so bad that, Yahweh was really up against a hard stop. The day of reconciliations is too late. He cannot reconcile his relationship with Yisrael and Yehudim on the day of reconciliations. It's over by that time. So there has to be a period of time where Yehudim and Israelites collectively change their attitude towards God, return to him, come to respect him, and come to know him, and come to love him. And unfortunately for God and for Israel, there wasn't a single Yehudim through whom Yahweh could work to accomplish that. And so unfortunately for them, fortunately for us, he had to work through a goy. Because God's not going to do it alone. That is absolutely out of the equation. And so he had to find a goy, because he was the only person willing to rationally and open-mindedly invest the time to consider what he had to say and to go where the words lead. And it was a goy, as we read in that passage from Yeshayahu 55, who was calling out to Yisrael on behalf of Yahweh, lifting them up and introducing them to God.
Now, I translated that today, 55, 5 and 6.
And you did?
And I examined the English translators, and what they do, and this has got to be purposeful, they all of a sudden, instead of goy, they use nations, like it's some big nation that's doing this thing. So
yes.
they just, and it's male singular. It's like any idiot could figure this. This was easy to translate. I mean, maybe not to write it really as good as you and JB do, but for me, it's easy to isolate each word and say that's what it means. No, hands down. And no way you can do it. I did everything I could. And it keeps coming out the same thing. That's a great translation. Totally correct from everything I know. And they change it to nations and just twist the damn thing and just go, how you, God, you.
Yeah, I mean, this is how it reads.
They had to know.
You're talking about 55 and 56. 55, 5 and 6.
5 and 6, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. So it's behold, hen. Pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
You shall be called out, invited, and summoned. Kara. You shall be asked to read, and then meet, even welcomed. I just love Kara there. I mean, I'm sitting, of course, in my study. I'm sitting on my study on Kara at the moment, but that what we're doing here is we're calling out to God's people. We're inviting them. We're summoning them. We're asking them to read and then meet and be welcomed. Kara. So, behold, you shall be called out, invited, and summoned by a goy. This isn't plural, it's singular. By a goy, a Gentile, a non-Yisraelite. By the way, Gentile, we use it because it is the common translation of goy.
Yeah.
And it's understood by 99.999% of people as those who are not ethnically Jewish, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know that it's actually a transliteration of a Latin term, and Gentile Gentile and Latin means non-Roman.
Yeah, I had read that once. Yeah, that sounds very familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really an interesting word. Anyway, by a goy, singular.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A non-Yisraelite. Right. You do not, Yada. You do not know. You do not recognize or acknowledge or understand. Further, a goy, singular, an individual of a different ethnicity, not known, lo yada ata, to you and by you, shall chase after you on account of Yahowah, your God, and also on behalf of the set apart of Yisrael. For indeed, in truth, he will lift you up and endow you with honor. He's going to distinguish you, making you the object of these revelations. Choose to seek Derash, Yahweh, while he may be found. Choose to call upon him while he is near. It's not a hard translation. This one's pretty easy.
No, let me show you what they did. They said, behold, you will call a nation you do not know, and a nation which knows you not will run to you because of the Lord your God, even the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. And then the last part was pretty accurate.
Okay. So the first part is a contradiction. How could God call a nation he does not know?
That's right.
How can God call a nation he does not know? And they got the pronouns screwed up.
Right.
It's that you do not know. He's speaking to Yisrael. And so it's a goy that you do not know. By the way, I was just translating something this afternoon that was in Hosea, and it actually says Yada Yahweh. It's just Yada Yahweh, and it's right there in Hosea. And I'm reading that. I said, "Oh, that's pretty cool."
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. The reason that's pretty cool, of course, is the first 7 volumes were Yada Yahweh. Yada Yahweh.
Yeah.
But there it was just Yada Yahweh.
Well, thanks, yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, thanks. That's pretty cool. I appreciate that.
Wow.
But
this is deliberate.
so that you're
deliberately. They must know.
Right, because that it's a nonsensical translation that corrupts, changes the pronoun such that you're saying that God doesn't know this nation, but yet he is calling out to a nation that he does not know. Say, huh?
Yeah.
Now,
you do.
It's true that...
Hey, you! You! Over there!
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know you.
Okay.
Yeah. For indeed, in truth, he will lift you up. Now, how is it, for in truth, he will lift you up if he is a nation? He can lift you up if he is a Gentile, a goy, right? But he can't lift you up if he is a nation. It doesn't say, for in truth, that nation will lift you up. No. For in truth, he will lift you up and endow you with honor.
God is so it's just so wrong. God, you just want to slap somebody.
Yeah,
those translators.
That passage too, that in Hosea, it makes it abundantly clear that there is a very finite window of opportunity, because I've been translating the part where Yahweh says, "I'm going to make you my bride, and I'm going to wed you to me," and so I spent a lot of time thinking about that relationship between husband and wife and how it differs from the relationship between father and son. And some of the most profound things I've ever written were written this morning as I was contemplating that. And then I looked at the conjugations, where it's very clear that this is a time-limited offer, and that what we find is that not only is the offer made 3 times, which is really instructive as to how time is divided into these 3 segments,
how important,
but he uses anah in a repeated way, so that anah is repeated 5 times in one statement. And I began to think about why is he talking about responding? Twice God responding to us, once heaven in the spiritual realm responding to us, and twice us responding back to God. And you've got 5 of these. And why 5? And when we get to that chapter, it's one of the more, I was just dazzled as I was thinking about the insights of all of this and how God is positioning this after the first 5 mikra have been fulfilled, but before the 6th, because the window of opportunity for Yisrael and Yehudah to be remarried to Yah is after the 5th mikra has been fulfilled, but before the 6th. After the Teruah harvest, but before Kippurim. And yet, Kippurim is the mikra which has been most corrupted by religious Jews on the very word that Yahweh is using here. It's anah. So rather than answer and respond, which is the definition of the word, the rabbis changed anah to afflict and debase, so that the day of reconciliation becomes a day of afflicting and abasement as opposed to responding and answering. And he puts all of this in the context of reconciliation after the 5th and before the 6th mikra, and that's the time opportunity that they have. A very limited period of time. So the stuff that you can learn from Yahweh just by having an open mind, being rational in your approach, going to where the words lead, and getting up early in the morning and doing it. We all have, there's not a lot of people whose time between, 5 and 7 in the morning is occupied with other stuff where they couldn't do this if they didn't want to.
Yeah.
And think of the energy and the enlightenment and the enrichment that it gives you for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why Dowd did it. That's why it's good to follow his example. All right. Well, I hope that you have a wonderful week with, and that Terry has a recovery. And JB, thank you again. We'll be with you all next week. We'll pick up right here with Shabbat. Embrace this, because it gets even better than what we have read thus far.
Wow. Shabbat shalom, y'all.
Shabbat shalom. Good night. Bye.
Night.